everyone. Hi guys. Hi Ondřej and Tomáš. Hello everyone here in the small hall. I'm happy to see someone came to to ask questions. So this is great that there is still someone interested in HTML and CSS. And I'm also excited that there were two excellent talks purely about HTML and CSS, which boys just have had a while ago, and we are here to ask them some questions. So feel free to fire questions on us. I also have something here in my notes, and so let's start. Let's go with it. So, is there something you want to ask, guys, right now? Okay. So Honza was first.
So, I have a question for Tomáš. As you mentioned, backdrop click on dialog, it doesn't close the dialog currently. Even like the pseudo element backdrop and so on. Did you read somewhere, or do you know if they planned to implement this, or is it like a bad UX, or why isn't it?
I actually didn't catch they would plan to add it. So I don't know, to be honest. But eventually it's just like 3 lines on JavaScript. I would expect they would add it in the future, but I don't know if that's the case.
There was an interesting discussion because I was solving this problem together with Honza, and there was a discussion of UX designers, and the question was, why is this a pattern at all? That you click on outside of a model of a dialog and it closes. Nobody knew.
I guess someone figured it out as a first, and I just like it as well.
Now everybody just repeats the pattern, and nobody knows why it's there.
And the escape key works by default?
Escape key works by default. Other thing which behaves slightly different than from the JavaScript dialogs we are used to is that there's actually no focus trap. So if you have focus in dialog and tap, and you reach the last focusable element, the tab will jump out of the page. Like, you can't tap the content behind the dialog, it's hidden for the browser, so it will move focus to like tabs or other stuff in the browser window, not on the page. So that's also slightly different behavior. Again, maybe it's a question what's a better solution if the user can't escape the dialog, even if he needs to, or this. So.
Okay. There was one more question.
I have a question for both of you. I'll start with Tomáš because the first question is about dialogues. So, in our project we have dialogues over dialogues, and I want to ask if this is possible with dialogue.
It's possible, and it works pretty nice because the native dialog, no matter where you put it, the browser will always show it at the top, no matter what you do with it. So. Even if you would have dialog in some web component in Shadow DOM, it will cover everything. And there's something like dialog stacking context. So if you open the dialog in the dialog, it will show correctly above the dialog, and you can continue. So.
And can I position the dialog? For example, we have a dialog that's on like right side of the page.
Yeah,
it's possible.
You can do anything CSS allows you to. By default, it's positioned in the middle of the page, but you can move it whenever you want.
That's perfect, thank you. And for Ondřej, we do React. We use style components, and you told us about the cascading layers. And from what I got, it's mostly for like these big, huge CSS files. But I'm wondering if this can be used in style components. And if I have, for example, our stack is kinda complex, I don't like it. I'd like to replace everything, but we don't have a budget for it. But for example, we have this like big style sheet with, bootstrap-like CSS. Then we have a component library that's in CSS modules for some reason. And then we have style components. The question here is that, there's order of priority because, there's CSS modules and you can't really adjust that because that's managed by Next.js. So is the cascading layers more for like those big CSS files where you have like 5 of them and you want to order them? Or is this for the small stuff, actually?
Okay, thank you. So, my guidance on this would be that you probably should not use a technology unless you have a need for that. So if you never run into a problem with the priority, problem with the cascade or with the specificity, then probably you do not need to use this right now. On the other hand, when I was being introduced by those two moderators, they told us as a funny story that I've never used jQuery in my life, which is true. But I have also never used style components in my life, so probably I'm not the best qualified person to answer this.
Okay, thank you.
I can maybe answer that because we use style components in my work. So you can combine it. So you could define the layers in CSS modules and in style components, and it will work because the browser will parse the styles and he has to deal with it. So if you have same layers at two different files, it will be the same layer. That's what I would expect, how the browsers behave. So technically you can.
Yeah, what I would probably want. I just wanted to ask you.
So if you don't need that, then that's the question. But if you want some better separation, maybe between some third-party libraries and your code, layers are quite a good fit. Even if we use style components, I already had like few specific issues with that. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all.
May I ask, Tomáš? You said you are using CSS in JS style components. Do you find it easier to write CSS or to style the page, style the components using CSS in JS rather than the pure CSS?
It depends.
Because at the end of the day, it's still CSS in the browser. Yeah. And when you are closer to the source, you maybe know what's going on.
I would say it depends.
Okay.
Like it's. Really depends how you write the code. If you put the style components in one file, like the React component, then it's really easy and convenient because you're working with one file. For example, we have a code convention that the style components are in different file. So from that point of view, I really don't care if I am creating a JavaScript file or CSS file. Personally, I don't like the style components don't have that good support in the text editors. For example, I'm using Emmet quite a lot, and it's not always working 100% in VS Code for style components. But yeah, I think it has good developer experience, and I think it like moved the CSS in some direction. But I don't have strong preference. Like. Okay. Everything has pros and cons.
Okay. But maybe it can be just because you know what's going on in the background.
Yeah, like one of the major benefits which can be often heard from style components is that you can theme the page dynamically, especially before the CSS variables. That was a thing, but I almost never had to actually do that. So most of the time I'm writing just static CSS. So.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any question? Okay. I have my own list. So guys, I would like to ask you both if you think that HTML and CSS is developing in a right direction and at a right pace. How happy are you with current state of HTML and CSS? Maybe.
Okay, so yeah, first of all, I think it's moving in the right direction. I'm mostly happy. About the pace, that's a tricky question because the pace obviously is very high and probably higher than it needs to be because I would say that folks find it far too complex to stay in touch with everything that gets introduced. So with respect to the learning curve, it probably shall not be that fast as it currently is, because we don't only have HTML and CSS, we also have JavaScript and related tech. So in order to
that's for the other guys that are not in this room.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, once you go full front end, you need to know everything. So it's basically impossible to follow all this new development, and therefore I would think that the pace should be a bit smaller.
Yeah. Okay. Tomáš, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it goes right direction. Like there's bunch of patterns and components which emerge over the time, usually put together in JavaScript. And I think it's a good idea to try to standardize those things and provide some native solution, like the details and summary of the dialogue and other stuff.
But that actually isn't new. The details.
Details is quite old, yes.
Yeah, it's quite. I was surprised because it started to appear everywhere like year ago. I started to see it everywhere when I be it GitHub READMEs even. Yeah. You can put HTML into Markdown and use summary and details, and you have accordion, which is great. And it started to pop out everywhere, and I was excited. It's nothing new. It was there for years.
It's not new, but probably I'm looking at the back pages, but I didn't encounter it that much, to be honest. And later even didn't have a chance to use it that often. And yeah, as for the pace, I'm probably okay with the pace. I'm not able to follow all the stuff as well, as Ondřej said. So I usually need to be picky or like follow the sources and say, okay, I don't care about this that much. So it really depends what you focus on. So I don't know if your design system, so you may be more interested in new color stuff in the CSS. If you are mostly like just putting stuff together in React, you care probably about something else. So you have to prioritize.
Yeah, you are more interested in what's new in React 18 probably then. Okay.
I have a question. I just recalled I have a question for myself.
Okay.
It's not really my own question, but I just recall that I've been asked a question like a week ago regarding CSS layers. And so let me just repeat the question and present it and answer, because it was an interesting question. Martin asked me whether there is an existing CSS framework or library that is already using those layers. And if so, is it possible that their own layer names will collide with our own namings? Because we cannot really influence third-party code. So that would be possible. They choose name like reset and so on. That would be on a collision course. So as far as I know, no current CSS framework, including Bootstrap and Start and another, is using the layers feature, because they spent the last 10 years carefully tuning their selectors to not cause any more specific collisions. So they probably have no need to do so, and probably when they start rewriting for the next major version, they might be able. Fortunately for us, there really is no risk of collisions, because we are free to import a framework into a layer. And if that framework itself is using layers, these will get nested into our own layer, thus preventing the name collision by giving them their own namespace. So there is no risk of introducing namespace collisions.
Okay. And what happens if I use styles that do not use CSS layers? And on top of that, I have some CSS which uses.
Right, that's not really on top of that, that's rather below that, because automatically all styles which do not belong into a layer will go into a top level layer.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And is it something I can do in my project, like mix?
I suppose that's a recommended way of doing, slowly moving towards layers by introducing an empty layer and moving stuff into it slowly, incrementally. So in the same way you introduce TypeScript to your code base by moving one file into TS and so on and adding further. So I think that we will start with a small layer or two, moving rules, checking whether it still works and so on. Yeah, it's okay. It's recommended.
Okay, that's great. That's a great message, because so I can introduce it into my projects step by step.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
I got one more question about dialogues and. Sorry, guys. I want to use it, so I want to prepare for it. So for the dialogues and actually for the drop downs, can I edit the animation? For example, the modal should slide from the bottom or from the left.
You can. As I mentioned, you will have to use JavaScript and slightly tweak the stuff in the dialog. I recommend checking article from Adam Argyle on web.dev about dialogues. He does exactly that, like adding animation and stuff. The problem with that is that you need to change the display settings. So if dialogue is closed, it's display none. But in that case, you can't animate it. So there will be a little bit more work to make it work. In that case, it's for the consideration if the dialogue element is right for you, or if you are better with some like robust, accessible solution which already exists.
Or if the animation itself is right for you, right?
That's another thing. Yeah, you don't always need animation, but designers like animations. So.
That's not up to me. That's the Figma and the GitLab.
You can argue with designers, give them feedback. That's okay.
But if you are not sure if your users will love your animations, you can still wrap them inside a media query, like prefers reduced motion. Okay, and okay, thank you. Tomáš, I would like to ask, because you told that your time was already up, and there was something that did not fit your presentation, and because I haven't checked your slides. Before, so I haven't seen it, and I will tell later why I didn't do that. What was the things that did not fit the presentation?
Yeah, so originally I planned some little sneak peek in the like future HTML. I need to cut it off because I wouldn't fit into time. So sorry for that. So there are three things. One is the inert attribute, which basically does, like, if you put inert attribute on some HTML, that part of the DOM tree will become uninteractive for the users and hidden for the screen readers. It's like, it's not in the DOM.
I'm not here.
Yeah.
Don't click me.
Typical example is if you have a modal dialog and you open it, you want to put inert on the rest of the page. The dialog element does this for you, so you don't need to combine those two. But if you are developing some other kind of, I don't know, interactive widgets, like, I don't know, cookie banners or some maybe mobile menu, so that may be a good use case for this attribute. The second thing is, like, you probably know hidden attribute. Taká otázka? Some question?
Question for the first one. May I?
Yeah.
You mentioned that if you use dialog, it will do this disable this interactivity for you. But you also mentioned the dialog doesn't have focus trap.
It doesn't.
So how does it work together?
It looks like the dialog is the only thing on the page from the terms of like focus management. So if you hit like the last interactive element on the dialog and hit tab, the focus will move to the browser, not like the content of the page.
Okay.
So you get, I don't know, some icons at the status bar in the browser or tabs or something like that. So
but it still ignores elements like
Okay. You can't focus on the page. It really seems like the dialog is the only element on the page, but you can move focus outside of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, you probably know like hidden attribute. So Google introduced a new value to it. So now you can like type hidden equals until found, and the purpose of that is that if maybe you have disclosure widgets which have hidden content and you want to search on the page some text, it doesn't work. You can't find the text which is hidden. So with this new attribute, you can actually, the browser will find the text which is hidden, and it can trigger JavaScript like event, and you can programmatically open the hidden widget. And the third one is select menu, which should be kind of new replacement for the select box, like the native select box, which everyone hates to use because it can't be customized and styled. So we already use some weird JavaScript solutions. So the select menu basically allows you to customize it any way you want. There are some really nice examples on the demo page. It's by the way, driven by the Microsoft team. So you can like recreate word color picker in that, or some fancy around the emoji picker and stuff like that. So it's kind of work like web component. So you have the selectors for the CSS, like part something, and you can style maybe button or the list. Or you can even put inside your own markup using slots, kind of like React way or web components way. So It's very cool. It's more like experiment, so it may never actually get into the specification. But I suggest to check it out and see the examples. It's quite fun thing to play with it.
Cool, cool. That's great. I'm excited. I've learned something new today, even though I think I know HTML and CSS pretty well. I was a little bit nervous before your presentations today, the same way I was nervous when I obtained Martin Michalek's new book on layout. It has 440 pages. It's like, oh my God, I don't know something. There is something I don't know. So.
And he didn't mention floats.
Yeah, and which brings me to my next questions for you guys. Do you know what happens on the 15th of June in 4 days?
No idea.
No idea.
It's
an interesting
Wednesday.
Yes, it's an interesting anniversary for all of us. It's the end of support of Internet Explorer. So I've put this into my calendar, so I don't forget it.
I suppose there will be some countdown in the internet.
Okay, so because of Internet Explorer, we had to do like many hacky ways to code the designs we wanted to code, and we must we used to do some compromises and things. Today is no longer the case, or it doesn't have to be the case. Even if you need to support Internet Explorer, you can approach to it like it's fine. The content is accessible. It just works, and I don't care much if the design is broken much. So with today's CSS and HTML, it's possible to do things we always wanted. And my question for you is, do you think, or what are the most dirty things in HTML and CSS you still have to do today, and that you think they should be done better with native tools? You mentioned styling select element, which may be just an example of this. Yeah. What are your favorite situations that you always oh my God, when this is gonna be better?
So let me start, so you have more time to think about that.
Yeah.
So I'm really always surprised when I'm developing something locally, and the whole concept of JavaScript imports the ES6 modules is not working when served using the file pseudo protocol. So that's something that always pisses me off, because I just want to get something fast, up and running, and I need to turn on that local web server in order to just open the web page. So that's something that I think I see the security direction there, but it's complicating my life more than it should be.
Okay. Even though you have PHP or Python on your machine?
I have literally 10 different web servers on my machine.
You can use,
which I can use, but I normally turn them on only on purpose, and this is one of these purposes when it's really necessary.
Okay.
I really don't know. I still sometimes have to hack the specificity, so important and stuff like that. So I'm literally looking forward to cascade layers. As for the HTML, I don't know. I don't usually have to do some dirty tricks in HTML.
Maybe you don't even realize that, because we have all got used to it. That if there is no element no native element in HTML, just use a div. Yeah. And so. Because I think that there might be better support for for web app elements, for web app components, like menus with drop downs, maybe some toolbars or something. That it's just not there.
As far as HTML goes, input elements all these input elements, they have this JavaScript property called value as number. Not just the value, which is the string value, but also the property value as number. And this one is supported. And it's used to retrieve the value converted to number, because for certain input types, such as the range slider or the input type number. It's pretty logical to retrieve number values. Yeah. Unfortunately, this property only works for these elements, for these input types, only for the range and for the number. So if you have a text input and you wish the user to input a number in there, such as a phone number or the age or something where you, for whatever reason, do not require the input type to be a number, you are unable to retrieve the property value as number. That will return not a number. So you will have to retrieve the text value and convert it to number yourself. So that's, I would say, is an oversight. Because there are text inputs in which I want the user to present numbers, and I cannot use this property.
That's right, because even if when you think you work with numbers and there are number inputs in your forms on your web page or in your app, we tend to forget that they are still presented as strings, and the frameworks do it for us, so we don't know it sometimes. Okay. What more I have here? Talking about HTML and CSS, there have always been many tools building on top of these technologies, be it preprocessors, JS frameworks, or things like that. Do you think that, or would you agree that these tools are no longer necessary because the native language develops in the good direction? And what would be an example? Like, do you still use a preprocessor in your styles if you use CSS?
Right. Yes, I'm still using, but I would like not to. So I'm happy that the CSS features are basically aligned with what the preprocessors are doing. So the reasons to use a preprocessor are slowly diminishing. We even have a spec for nesting selectors in CSS natively, which is done, which is specified, formalized. Unfortunately, it's not implemented anywhere. So for me, that would be the last valid reason to use preprocessors. Once this gets implemented, I will probably stop using a CSS preprocessor altogether.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, so in terms of work, we basically just use the auto prefixer. But reasons for that are diminishing as well. If I build something custom, I still use PostCSS for some nice features like the nesting or custom queries, so I don't need to type long query string and stuff like that. But for example, SAS I didn't use for a few years. I don't have to. So.
Yeah, because okay, cool. Like when every time I'm starting a new project, which doesn't happen much, but it happens from time to time, I always want to use as few technologies and tools as possible. And I'm always curious if it's possible, if I can do that, if I can build a project just with the pure technologies. And it's better and better, but still there is a place for templating around the HTML, because if you're building a static website, even with not in a no-code way, but with the code, that you are still better off using these tools for templates. You still need some kind of dev stack for CSS. You mentioned auto prefixer, which may be diminishing now, because yes, browsers are getting aligned, better aligned, like with the standards, and maybe there is something new happening, which is quite the opposite, and this is something like Babel for JavaScript, which emulates new upcoming features of CSS. Have you heard about it? post CSS env, preset env?
Yeah, that's actually what we use in work. It's like, from my point of view, it's kind of like auto prefixer or steroids, because it's compiled to like usable CSS. Good thing is that you usually don't need to like think about it. You set it once and it does the work.
You can enjoy using the shiny new syntax of.
And as for tools, I think these days it's mostly not about like compatibility, but mostly about some developer experience and how easy it is to us for work with the stuff. As you mentioned, templates, some kind of components and stuff like that.
Templates. You didn't mention the template tag today.
Yeah, I didn't. It's used in the web components. I don't have really any experience with that so far. So.
It's actually it doesn't have to be part of web components. I was surprised when I discovered that, and it can be just used with just a few lines of JavaScript. You define a template in your HTML, and then you inject it into any div of your choice and fill it with data of your choice, and it's just there. No web components, no framework. It works pretty well in the browser.
That's cool.
Yeah, but the point of the template element is that it's inert. So I see some conflict between the template tag and the inert attribute Tomáš was talking about, because they fulfill the same role to create a part of the DOM which cannot be interacted with, which cannot load resources, which cannot execute scripts, and be prepared in the background in order to be filled with data afterwards. So I think that's pretty similar with the inert attribute. And when we have two ways to achieve the same, often one of them will get obsoleted. So I'm curious whether the inert attribute or the template element
I think it has a different purpose.
Could be.
Because as opposed to the inert attribute, content of the template tag is not visible in your web page. It's just a definition. It's not shown.
Yeah, but it gets parsed. So the resulting tree is created. All these elements are appended. So right. It's like the dead part of the tree. It still is a tree, but it's not living anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. My last question: what are the talks you are going to visit today? Are you staying in the cinema hall or?
Yeah, most of the time.
Probably. Yeah, I like front-end talk, so probably cinema.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone in the hall, and let's continue with seeing the talks and talking about HTML and CSS stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.